Risk identification. Now, risk identification is a systematic attempt to specify threats to the project, plan, estimate, schedule, resource loading, etc. So, risk identification is a systematic, step-by-step attempt that you are trying to estimate in future these kinds of threats, these kinds of errors we may face during our entire project plan. Risk is not always associated with the development. Risk is also associated with other phases of your development life cycle, that is your estimates, your schedules, your resource arrangement. For example, you have, due to some or the other problem, if you have made incorrect estimations, your schedule slippage is there, your resource loading, I mean the resources that you have occupied, the resources which are there in your project, I mean there is some kind of a problem with those kind of resources. So risk is always there in all the steps, all the stages of your development life cycle. So by identifying known and unknown and predictable risks, the project manager takes first step towards avoiding them and when possible, and controlling them and when necessary. So in yesterday we have seen the types of risk: known risk, predictable risk, and unpredictable risk. So there's no point in thinking about unpredictable, since these situations cannot be predicted. So there's no point in that. But the known risks, by carefully going through all the system plan, by carefully going through the designs, known risk can be identified. Predictable risk, based upon the prior experience, the predictable situations are there, which comes after due experience. So the project manager can take the first step. I mean, if the project manager can estimate the probable risks, then those risks can be avoided whenever it is possible, like whenever team feels like this situation is leading towards a potential threat or potential risk, then those situations can be avoided. There are two distinct types of risk: generic risks and product specific risks. Generic risks, as name suggests, these kind of risks are general in nature. I mean, they are potential threat to every software project. So some of the example include, say, resource leaving in between the software development. So engineer or the resources who are involved in development activity, in analysis, a complete software development life cycle, resources may leave the company. So leaving experienced resources having experience about this project. So this can happen with any company, with any project. These are generic kind of risks. So product specific risk. Product specific risk means these risks are dependent on your software development environment. It is related to your application, it is related to your product that you are working on, it is related to your company only, your product specific risk. So this risk can be identified only by those with a clear understanding of the technology, people, environment that is very specific to the software that you are trying to build. Since these risks are not general in nature. See, general risk means everybody knows about this. If everybody knows about this, they can have a clear idea, they can estimate something about it, and all the preventionary measures can be taken to avoid this generic risks. But product specific risk can only be estimated by a set of people or a person who is experienced in that kind of product development activity, who have already worked upon similar kind of product development earlier, who is well aware of your development environment. He can only predict this product specific risk. Now, one method for identifying risk is to create a risk item checklist. The checklist can also be used for risk identification and focus on some subset of known predictable risk in the following general subcategories. So one of the method is suggested here is to prepare a product size. The risk associated with the overall size of the software to be built or modified. Need to focus on the product size. Business impact, the risk associated with the constraints imposed by management or the marketplace. We know that. What are the various factors of business impact? The software that you are developing but nobody wants it. The software that everybody wants it but you are not able to sell it. The loss of focus of the management. All this factor includes your business risks. The risk associated with the constraints which are imposed by management or this marketplace is known as business impact or the business risks. Stakeholder characteristics. Risks associated with the sophistication of the stakeholders and the developer's ability to communicate with stakeholders in a timely manner. This particular type of a risk is associated with the communication criteria or the communication with the stakeholders. Developers' ability to communicate with the stakeholders. Process definition. Risk associated with the degree to which software process has been defined and is followed by the development organization. Before starting your project development life cycle, you have defined a process that will follow it. The process is associated, process is attached with the milestones, process is attached with the delivery timeline, process is attached with the defined schedule, and how it is followed by the development organization. You need to keep track, you need to have a proper checklist for that. Deviation in the checklist can give you a potential indication that we are moving towards a risky situation, risky scenario. Development environment. Risk associated with the ability and quality of the tool to be used for building the product. Ability and quality of tools that you are using for your development life cycle. So any deviation in the quality, any deviation in the usage of this associated tools will lead to you and development environment risks. Technology to be built. Risk associated with the complexity of the system to be built. The complexity of the system to be built. And the newness of the technology that is packaged by the system. This can be tracked. Staff size and experience. Risk associated with the overall technical and the project experience and software engineers who are actually working on your project development. Is risk components and drivers. Now risk components are defined in following manner. Say performance risk, cost risk, support risk and schedule risk. So performance related risk. The degree of uncertainty that product will meet its requirement and is fit for its intended use. So performance risk means you have started software development by having certain idea that the performance of software you have defined, the performance of the software is defined. So the degree of uncertainty that your product will meet its requirement. See, you have stated n requirements to be satisfied by your software, and at the end when you have completed it is able to meet say n-5 requirements. So it is your software is not able to cope up, your software is not able to meet the expectations related to the performance. Is known as performance risk. Now cost risk, definitely the name suggests is associated with the budget, it is associated with the money. Whatever you have estimated, whatever project schedule, whatever cost estimation you have finalized, if you are able to finish the development, if you are able to deliver the required product within that stipulated cost, then it is okay. Otherwise, if there is budget overshoot, then the cost risk is there. Support risk. Support risk is basically, we have seen three kinds of support activity. One is where we correct the the software that you have developed, and if there are any errors in that, the corrective maintenance, the corrective support. Second one is adaptive support. We have seen adaptive means the changes required the changes required in your software to adapt it to the current environment, current statutory requirements. It is not to correct the errors. The software is working fine, but the surrounding environment in which the software is working, there are certain changes in the environment, and to meet the requirement, to cope up with these changed requirement, what you can say, around the software, you are doing some changes. The example that we have seen, the interest calculation is working fine, but the government has revised the interest calculation, say interest percentage. So definitely the changes in the software is needed to cope up with the changed environment, changed budgetary announcements. And third one is enhancement. Enhancement means the functionality is working fine. There are certain new additions in the software. So the degree of the uncertainty that the resultant software will be easy to correct, easy to adapt, easy to enhance is known as support risk. If it is very difficult to support, correct, adapt and enhance, then the huge risk is involved there. Schedule risk again associated with the time. Will you be able to deliver your product as per your promise, as per the schedule that you have finalized on? So these are performance risk, cost risk, support risk and schedule risk. The impact of each risk driver on the risk component is divided into 4 categories, say negligible, marginal, critical and catastrophic. So negligible means if you can neglect these kind of indicators. Marginal, I mean, you may think to work upon and you may try to delay it, delay the correction. But critical means you need to immediately focus on this. And catastrophic means stop everything, start working on this, because catastrophic means because of this particular problem, because of this particular error, everything has stopped now. The system has stopped working. Catastrophic is also known as showstopper. Show has stopped because of this error. Next is risk projection. So risk projection is also called as risk estimation. And it attempts to rate each risk in 2 ways. So risk estimation, it tries to rate the risk in following 2 ways. First one is the likelihood or the probability that the risk is real. Risk may happen. The likelihood or the probability that the risk may happen. And the consequence of the problem associated with the risk, should it occur. Again, this is something known as uncertainty and this is something known as loss. The 2 factors are uncertainty and loss. So uncertainty means it may happen, it may not happen. So when you say it may happen, so the probability of its happening, it's 50% probability, it's 60% probability, 10% probability. What is the estimation? So if it happens with that probability, then what is the consequences of the problem associated with the risk? Consequences means associated with the loss. The loss associated with the situations. So risk estimation is basically tries to rate each risk on 2 factors: uncertainty, the probability, quantifiable, and the problems associated, the loss, again quantifiable. If it is schedule risk, then how much schedule, the problem, I mean how much delay that you are expecting. If it is cost related risk, then how much budget overshoot you are estimating. So these kinds of quantifiable things needs to be noted down. So your work along with other managers and technical staff to perform 4 risk projection steps. There are 4 steps for the risk projection or the risk estimation. Establish a scale that reflects the perceived possibility of the risk. Establish the scale. Establish some kind of a guideline. Establish some kind of a reference that reflects the possibility of a risk. Simply you feel that it is a risk, it cannot be identified as a risk. There should be certain baseline, certain scale, certain reference points. Define the consequences of the risk. Whatever risk you have identified, what are its various consequences? Needs to be defined properly. Estimate the impact of the risk on your project or the product that you are working on. Estimating the impact. Estimating the impact means estimating the losses, various kinds of losses associated with the risk. Assess the overall accuracy of the risk projections so that there will be no misunderstanding. Now, whatever projection you have done, you need to assess the accuracy of that risk projection as well, so that there will be no misunderstanding. So, mitigation, monitoring and management means identify the risk, plan the risk, have proper checklist with you, then throughout the life cycle, development life cycle, monitor it, and if risk becomes reality, then manage it. So developing a proper plan wherein you have to proper analyze, you have to properly estimate potential defects, potential scenarios which may lead to a risky situations. So you need to adapt a proactive strategy. And proactive strategy comes with a plan for risk mitigation. So for example, here assume that high staff turnover is noted as project risk R1. High staff turnover means many experienced people are leaving that particular project. Based on the past history and management intuition, the likelihood of high turnover is estimated as 0.70. 0.70 means 70% probability है कि high turnover रहेगा. High turnover means the people will leave your project before the completion. And the impact associated with that projected high staff turnover is critical. It means that high staff turnover, the uncertainty is 0.70. The uncertainty is very high. The probability of this staff high turnover is 0.7. It is very higher side. And if this situation, if this anticipation, if this estimate becomes reality in future, then its loss, its impact is very critical. Critical on what? Critical on the project cost and project schedule. So definitely the experienced staff or the people will leave your project, then definitely you will you need to schedule interviews, you need to acquire new people, you need to bring new people into the project. You need to spend some amount of time and money in their proper what you can say, the knowledge transfer, their then they will be able to provide some benefit to the project. एकदम से कोई ज्वाइन करेगा और तुरंत आपके प्रोजेक्ट में डेवलपमेंट करने लगेगा, ऐसा नहीं. You need to provide him proper knowledge, proper knowledge transfer time. So cost and money both are involved in that. And definitely उसके बाद भी जब वो काम करेगा, he may not be able to work as good as the people who are already experienced, who have left the company. So the schedule slippage will also be there. To mitigate this risk, you would develop a strategy for reducing turnover. You need to develop a strategy for reducing the turnover. Among these possible steps, what could be the possible steps that you can take? Meet the current staff to determine the causes for turnover. Poor working conditions, low payment, competitive job market, etc. Other situations will be there. Out of those conditions, if few conditions are under your control, then those causes can be handled by, those causes can. Once the project commences, assume turnover will occur and develop techniques to ensure continuity when people leave. आप कितना भी precaution ले ले, always assume that once the project has started, out of 10, 2, 3, 4, 5 people will leave, and plan your activities accordingly. How to plan? Organize project teams so that information about each development activity is widely dispersed. All the members of the team should aware of what other people are doing. Define the product standards, establish mechanisms so that the things are well documented and kept stored in a repository, whereas all the teammates can access these kinds of documents and get benefited. Conduct peer reviews of all work. Peer reviews. Whatever work is done by person A, ask person B, C, D to review the work done by A, so that B, C, D person will have an idea of what A has done. So there is no bottleneck, there is no dependency on one particular person, one particular team member, that he is working on it and nobody else knows what he is working on. Once he is gone, nobody will be in position to tell कि what he has done. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. आप जो काम कर रहे हैं वेल डॉक्यूमेंटेड होना चाहिए. आप जो काम कर रहे हैं वो एक प्रॉपर वेल डॉक्यूमेंटेड वेल रिपोजिटरी में होना चाहिए. पीयर रिव्यूज होने चाहिए. टीम वर्क होना चाहिए, so that in case few people left, then also in case few people leave, then also the project should go on. Assign a backup staff member for every critical technology. Simple requirement analysis. Specify software operational characteristic. क्या क्या operation करना चाहिए. It should indicate the software interface and system elements. What are the various software interfaces are there? Multiple modules are there, so how they will interact with each other, interfaces, how user interface will look like. Other system element. Establish the constraint that software must meet. Clearly identify the scope. Okay. Requirement analysis allows the software engineer to elaborate on basic requirement. ठीक है, whatever is the basic requirement, उसको एक elaborate करने में help होगी during earlier requirement engineering task. Build models that depict the user scenarios, functional activities, problem class, relationship, system behavior, flow of data, all these kind of analysis if you try to do, this will help you in better requirement analysis.